Here we are. Sherry, tell us what your sweatshirt says.
So,
Oh, if you can see it for anybody who's on while we're waiting, it says perfectly imperfect.
I love it.
But as we're going to talk about the gospel tonight, I was thinking, well, it should say perfectly perfect. If I'm in Christ Jesus, which I am.
Mhm. That's great.
we are officially live now. So if anyone's on with us so far, just welcome. So we're so glad that you're here. We're just going to wait for a few minutes so that some more people can pop in. And if you wouldn't mind just putting in the comments, where are you coming from? Where do you live, or where are you from? Where you wish you were right now. So we'd love to hear from you. And we'll get started with introductions in just a minute. Okay. What are you drinking there, Tammy?
Water, although I kind of wish it was something warm. I've got a couple waters, and actually I've never done this before, but I brought two of the same cup, so if in case I finish one, it won't look like I've gone to a second drink, but just there you go. You're ready.
That's right.
Deneen, let me just ask you a question. When you're saying for people to put in on comments, I've got my Facebook up here. Where would they put that comment? Would you just say it right on the Facebook page?
Right. So if you're looking at us live right now, if you just scroll down to the bottom, just hit that comment. Oh, well, man, we see you. I'm so glad you're here. Robert Blevins, thanks for being here. From my living room.
That's great.
Karen, good to see you. Bethany. Okay, so I don't want to distract myself too much, but as people are coming on, thank you so much for being here.
Yay. That's great. Yay. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, well, why don't we let's just start with some introduction. So my name is Deneen Blevins. I'm the now Executive Director of Parakaleo, and we're here with co-founders Tammy Resch, who's the Director of Programs and Resources, and Sherry Thomas, who's the Director of Global Strategy. So really happy to be here with all of you. We can imagine that some people are coming in with just a range of emotions. Maybe some of you are in closed quarters now. You know, you're at home with spouses, with kids, or maybe you're hanging on your own and just have had a completely different change of circumstances and lifestyle, which is really hard. And you may be dealing with a range of things, from dealing with homeschooling all of a sudden to maybe loss of income and just hearing some life-changing news today. And then also, we don't want to ignore the reality that this is about the impact that this is having on people's lives, that people are maybe dealing with sick loved ones, or loved ones that they can't reach because of barriers to the medical situation. So we just want to say welcome to you all, no matter where your heart is right now, what your situation is. We just see you, and we're just really glad that you're here. We're hoping that the tools and the resources that we share in our short time together are going to be an encouragement to you. This ministry is called Parakaleo. Some of you may be familiar with us already because you've been a part of our training programs or know some of us, or maybe you're a friend of a friend of a friend and have no idea what this word Parakaleo means. It actually means coming alongside, and it's a ministry that was created to value, train, and support women in church planning. And what we do is we help women bring the truth of the gospel from head to heart. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with difficult situations in life, you really forget that like real quick. You may know the truth of the Bible up here, but when it comes down here and dealing with disappointments and unfulfilled longings and struggles in ministry and church planning and marriage, we've come up with tangible tools that you can hold on to, visuals, and we teach you to develop an arsenal that'll help you remember the truth that we say that we believe. So this is, with the situation that we're going through with our country right now with COVID-19, it's just really unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before. So there's no playbook for this. And so when we think about women in church planning on a much smaller, I won't say smaller, but in a much different way, there is some similarity there. Planning a church for many of us was like nothing we ever experienced before. We didn't have a playbook for it. It seems like all the rules changed. We lost our support network. We really lost our foundation. And that's what this experience has felt like. Just everything that I thought was true has just been turned upside down. And so what we've been really praying about as a staff is how can we use the resources that God has given to us through Parakaleo to come alongside other women and help them deal with some of the ambiguity of this situation so that they can come alongside other women and help them deal with it as well. So there's two main things we want to do tonight. First, we just want to talk about some of the tools and arsenal that have been helpful for us as we're going through this process and dealing with some of the disorientation, not because we're going through the same situation that you may be going through, but hopefully some of what we share is going to be transferable to what you're dealing with. And then the second thing that we want to do is we want to like model what we say is a gospel community. What's it like for women to come together and really share from their heart? I have a friend named Bonnie who years ago, I would go to her and just kind of like vent, all the things that were going on inside of me. And I would say, I'm so sorry, because I felt like I should be more spiritual than that. And she said, baby, sometimes you just got to feel what you got to feel. And so we try to create these spaces where you could just feel what you feel without any explanation, without anybody throwing a Bible verse at you, although scripture is important. Don't hear me say that it's not, but sometimes we just really need to get things out there with people that understand. So before we get started, I want to just give a shout out to those of you who are here. I'm sorry, I can't see all the names there. Also, thank you for the brothers that have joined in. Thank you for valuing and training and supporting women through your participation. And we know that what you hear is going to be helpful for your heart as well. And if you would just leave in the comments, we're curious, like how are you coming into this space? What are and feel free to share as little as surface level or as deep as you want to share. How's your heart today? Maybe use one or two words to describe either how you're feeling or how you've been impacted over the last couple of weeks. Okay. So just to get started, I threw out this term, Shari, gospel community. Yeah. What people may be coming in. What do you think can you explain what I mean when I say the gospel?
Okay. I love this, that at Parakaleo, we always go back to this, even though we all say, well, we know what that means, but we hear that word so often that a lot of times we're like, well, what really does that mean? So just to remind us, when we use the term gospel, we're referring to good news that we've been made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And then the next thing that I like to think of it as two things. It's two different things. I mean, two very important parts here, key aspects. One is that we receive forgiveness, meaning our record is wiped clean. Like, wow, I'm totally forgiven, not just for the past, but also for today and for the future. It's over with. I have a clean record, but would just leave me with a blank slate. And so the next part that I think is so important is that we are credited with Christ's righteousness. So therefore, it means that really everything that belongs to Christ also belongs to me. And God sees me as righteous in Jesus Christ. And as I was thinking of the coronavirus with the stock markets falling and that panic of, oh no, my bank account or what's in it, to go, oh, my account with God is always full. I've always had that righteousness. I don't ever lose that. I can struggle with feelings, with unbelief. I can struggle with sin. Oh no, but that righteousness is always there. So it has those two equal parts that are very important, the forgiveness and then the righteousness of Christ. And many of you have heard this. I always like to say it because it just helps me to go, we are more sinful and broken than we could ever admit. And we are more loved, more forgiven, and made righteous in Christ more than we could even hope for. So there we go. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shari. Ring that bell, Tammy.
I know. That is something to celebrate.
So Tammy, so we've got the gospel down. We know that it's not just how we're saved, but the gospel doesn't just save us. The gospel keeps us, as Jackie Hill Perry says. But Tammy, what do I mean by community? Like, what is a gospel community?
Well, Sherry, the way Sherry is describing it is that we have it because being in Christ, when we believe in him, we're given a new identity, and that new identity actually leads to a new way of relating. And so I think there's something really powerful and special when you're in a community kind of marked by the gospel, where the gospel isn't just something, well, the community can be virtual, as we're doing right now. It can be face-to-face. It can be just with one other person or a group of any size. But anytime you're in a community where the gospel is not just the content of what we're talking about, or maybe part of the conversation or what we're looking to and hope, but the gospel ends up being actually kind of the dynamic that you're relating to one another. So graciousness, hope, humility, curiosity, confidence in who God is, and the thing, like Sherry said, things that are never going to change, even though everything around us might be. When that becomes part of the dynamic, there's something really special and powerful about being in there. I think in those kind of communities, you can show up as yourself, like whether you're full of complicated emotions, complicated thought processes. I have this like phantom Tammy in my head. She goes like in 1,000 different directions, but in a gospel kind of community, I can come and bring that, and people aren't shocked, stunned, surprised. Oh my gosh, we have to fix her. There's something wrong. We can also come with our heightened or even diminished reactions. I find sometimes I don't actually emotionally connect to what's happening around the pain and loss. I might even diminish it. But I think when you come into a space where the gospel is a dynamic, you can come as you are, show up as yourself in real time. No need for mask or pretense. And so some of the elements, there's lots of things that go into that, creating that kind of a space where you feel safe and free to be curled up in a ball, or to stand confident in hope and excitement, whatever that is. Some of the things, the elements that are involved in that, I think are maybe one of the phrases we like to use a lot is when we come with a posture of being more curious and certain. So even when we're asking questions of one another and kind of helping each other process, we're asking open, maybe neutral questions instead of very loaded or judgmental or assuming kinds of questions. And then as we listen, we try to do something else. I'm not very good at this at all. But we try to do something called giving a hug without rescue. That's kind of the response to listening. And it's not the kind of hug that in this, separate kind of space, we're not supposed to be literally hugging, but it's a hug that means hear, understand, and give words. And so, Deneen, like if we were in this space tonight and you shared, essentially anytime anyone shares some part of their life, their heart, their fears, their dreams, that you're disclosing something beautiful and precious about you and your story and your heart. And so we want to treat that as honor. We want to honor you and that the risk that you're taking to be vulnerable with that. And so part of giving words without rescuing is, my first response to you would be, how would I care for you, express that I've heard you, provide a response of empathy, and thank you for donating your trust to me or to us in this space, that kind of thing, as opposed to what's really easy to do and what I have to always ask for God's help to do, because I tend to do the rescue part really simply or easily. That's immediately reassure, that's the R. The first S is solve. I love to fix things, that I've got a tool for you and we can gospel our way right out of this. And that's not what we want to do. To not reassure, solve, share your own story unnecessarily, or like, I think it's Penelope, Kristen Wiig's Saturday Night Live, who's always twirling her hair and she does that one-upping. So that's another S. Or explain everything. So rescue, R-E-S, I'm getting my things, reassure, explain, solve, share your own story, and or one other thing, the Q is just like inundate with questions and kind of drill. So just a few elements of kind of a community where you can show up, bring your real life issues, and be cared for in a space. Those are just some of the things I think help create that environment. But again, it goes a lot back to what Sherry initially started with, when we can get our footing, not from how well we're handling life or how well we even care for each other in that space, but from what Christ says about us and the truth that is ours, apart from how well we're doing or what happens in our lives. That kind of gives the foundation for a really good community.
I love that. Thank you so much, Tammy. And because we have our gospel footing, we can even mess up, even knowing that hug about rescue. We can still be free, like when we get it wrong.
Yeah.
And we mess up. And that's
yes.
that You know, and I've been in this role for 2 weeks, and I love the fact that we don't just talk about these things and talk about how we're going to serve other women, but the way that we've been relating to each other as a staff, it's that same feeling. So I really appreciate that. Okay, let's get into it. How are y'all doing? So let's talk about, think about the last couple of weeks, how it's impacted your lives, your families, your ministry situations, your churches. What kind of parakaleo tools, arsenal have you been using to minister to your own heart and get your gospel footing? So Shari, do you want to start with that?
Okay, I'm going to start with explaining arsenal, because I'm sure we all kind of like, that's kind of a weird word, that speaks of arms. And so what we mean when we say arsenal is actually a place where you store arms, but we're thinking about for battling for our own hearts and our own minds. And I think of, when we look at scripture, it talks that we are going to be facing spiritual warfare, which, oh my goodness, if we're not facing this now, I just think of, how many times in the last week have you gone to fear? Have you gone to doubt? Have you gone to, so an arsenal is something that each individual person gathers together the tools that is going to take their heart back to the truth and beauty of the gospel. And the reason why we say for each of us to build our own is because, like, I know things that speak to Tammy, I think it's cool, but it doesn't draw me back to Christ. Or something that maybe Deneen, that's really meaningful to you, it might be like, great. And I'll admit this on streaming, like when somebody gives me a verse, it just kind of like, cool. For whatever reason, okay? I actually think it's because I was made to sit so quiet in church when I was a child that I just learned to tune out, So anyway, sorry, Mom, if you're listening. But so anyway, building that arsenal of truth and beauty, what's going to take you back to Christ? What is going to ground you when everything's swirling around you? And I'll give just one example. When we first kind of could tell that the virus was going to be, like, when it hit California, I was like, oh, it's going to spread. And then my very first thing was this doubt came to me of like, why don't we should never have left New York City. Because I started thinking of all the elderly people I know, the homeless people I know, I would be there to help. And again, so I had to sit there and pause and go, wait, what do I need to ground myself to go back to the truth that God has me here and for a reason? And I mean, there's so many things I can unpack with that. But what I did, one of the things I always do when I'm swirling is I go out in nature. So I happened to we had already been pretty soon into the thing. We'd already been isolating. And so I did a walk around my yard, and I noticed the crocuses were just starting to come up. And I looked at them and I was like, oh, look at that. The crocuses are like the lilies of the field. They're here today and gone tomorrow. They don't last very long. Immediately it took me to scripture. So then I'm looking up scripture, and I'll tell you the way that I do it. Alexa, oops, I should have, But it was like, I just said, where's the Bible verse on the lilies of the field and the birds of the air? Right away, it was Matthew 6. Okay, thank you. So then I just opened like my Bible and I started reading it, and I'm just reminding of, and I just have to read it for you because again, it's so cool. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. And then it went on to look at the birds of the air, how your Father feeds them. Are they not much more valuable than you? No, are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And I'm like, what a perfect verse for right now. Yeah, this could, it would be incredibly hard and sad, but we may, all of us, be losing loved ones, and so it's just like, okay, by worrying, of course I still worry, but it just was help to ground me and to go, okay, so nature, I will say, is one of the things that I use for my arsenal, is going out in nature. And this might just be a good time to kind of go, what is it that helps ground you in the truths of the scripture? What brings you back? Is it music? Would it be a playlist? Is it something physical that you hold? I do have this wooden cross I will hold on to that grounds me. There's lots of other things. So it might be something literal, physical that you can touch and feel, or it may be like ideas or things that you go to. So what takes your heart to remembering God's truth and beauty? That's what you would use for building an arsenal.
I love that, Sherry. Thank you so much. I love how you said that, like what appeals to you is not going to be necessarily what hits my heart. And so the point of it isn't to say, hey, this is what reminds you of truth, but it's to say, open your eyes and look around you, whether it's, out in your yard or in the hallway of your apartment complex, or, God is always at work around us. And it's just, a lot of times it's just opening our eyes and paying attention, and so, yeah, thank you, Sherry.
Let me just add this one other thing that I thought as I was thinking about this. I started going back, and every apartment that we've lived in, one time it was a basement apartment. I couldn't see nature anywhere, but I would lean my head out the window. I could see the sky if I leaned my head out the window. I know it sounds crazy, but it was like, oh, God knows me that well to know I need. So it's like, oh, I could see the sky. In another place, it was pigeons. That was New York. Yeah. But there's things, and I kept saying how all throughout my life, even when I have been in a very enclosed apartment, there are ways that is God's showing me there's nature there. You can find it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Sherry. How about you, Tammy?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Sherry is talking about nature and how much that lifts her eyes to look to God and get her bearings and perspective, and give her something to hold on to. And one of the things that mine usually is bound up somewhere with words, and with whether that's the word of God or just words in general, that kind of come alive, and pictures is another way too. So when you had actually asked this question about, I think it was a week ago Monday, to me, and said, is there a tool or something that's helping your heart in this time? You were just brand new at your job, and you were coming in and saying, I care for you. How's it, how are you navigating this? And it was interesting because I immediately was able to think of, oh yes, yesterday, which was a week ago Sunday, I was literally flying home from Denver, and coming back to Ohio from Colorado with a very different world that I was about, getting ready to face. So a lot of times I use visuals. So I've got this, think about a couple of days before that, while I was in Denver, I was literally still making plans for Parakaleo for us to be going to India. So this was really way off my radar that life was about to change. And so I'm in the airplane. I'm already feeling like, okay, there's a lot before me. I don't even know what it is, but the anxiety I could feel, not only will I'm having things that I might face, whether it's my own mortality or my husband's or someone that I love, or whether it's mortality or loss or just disorientation. I just remember feeling like this is right here in front of me. And it helped that I was on a plane looking out the window, and it reminded me immediately of our tool, the Journey, which is kind of our foundational tool. That is the one, essentially the invitation to zoom out, which is instead of just looking at right here what's in front of you and trying to see it or understand it or make sense of it or untangle it, zoom out, Tammy, get yourself some perspective. And so it's not just a picture. There's going to be lots of words that I'm going to say that this tool helped me, but this tool is kind of representing there's you and I on a path in a story that is actually my story, and your story is involved in a much bigger story. That overarching arch you see at the top is a big cosmic story of God's story of grace in this world. And he has told this story. He's actually written it to us in his book, the Bible, that answers those big questions that we have. Like I'm just going to do a brief overview of what this visual is representing, but answers those life questions that we have is, how did it all get started? What went wrong in this world? How's it going to get fixed? And how's this whole story going to end? And so immediately for me to zoom out and say, let me take a look at not just what I'm facing, but the fact that whatever I'm facing is in a bigger story. And so immediately, one of the things that I've been learning to do is not just to try to put words like, I don't know, maybe like theological concepts to things, but how do I personalize this? And so what I'm going to do, I'll probably just share for the next couple minutes of like some of what that personalizing this, my story inside this bigger story and what helped my heart. So one of the first things when I think about the overarching story and literally looking from the airplane, looking down and thinking, oh, that's right, there is someone that made this whole earth, who had the ability and the love to create and design all this. And he isn't just someone who knows and sees, he sees me. He sees me in this, and he sees everyone that I love. He sees us. He knows us. He loves. He's active. He's given me life and breath and everything else. And he's not going to be he's not going to be overwhelmed by whatever I face. Like I remember thinking, we're going to all go virtual, and then the internet's going to crash. And then I was thinking like, oh, isn't this beautiful that we have a God who will never crash. And there's no amount of overwhelming him with our cries or our fears or our pleas will he ever crash and like, oh, overloaded, I can't handle all this. His purposes can't be thwarted. So just zooming out and remembering, oh, wait a minute, before I even look at my own story, how could I remember that he's a part of this equation? I'm not here alone, and everyone I know on this earth is not alone. There is an author, and there's a God who's alive and present, and helpful. And then I'll just kind of give a little synopsis of each of those little different panels of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. Because I think what I tend to do is, like I mentioned before, I'll tend to get like clinical. Like, oh yes, creation, we were meant for this, we were made for this. And then in the fall, we're experiencing all this brokenness. But there's something really powerful when I personalize it and say, okay, wait a minute, I was made, and I'll invite you in this, but we were made for health. You and I, all of us, we were made for community, for intimacy without barriers, to feel and know that we are loved, that we're safe, protected. We were made to be at peace with the world and nature and with ourselves. We were made for abundance and no fear and no anxiety, and no death. And so when I think about those longings and what we were created for, then immediately when I feel the reality of, oh, I'm disconnected and I'm feeling lost, I'm feeling fear of my mortality. My husband and I both have had pneumonia a lot. So I literally had to come to a place, and I think I started it literally on that airplane thinking, okay, what can I believe and hold true to the fact that this is the end of the story on this earth for me or someone that I love. But the reality of the fall is not just that it's something that happens out there. It impacts all of us: isolation, disconnection, disease, barriers, fear, all of that. And so when I personalize it, it kind of normalizes the hard. And when you put those two juxtapose of what we were really made for and then what life is really like, that's a beginning place to begin the grieving. The personalizing for me with redemption, I think most of my life I've always thought, now Tammy, you got to figure this out. You know, what's your next step? You need to disentangle this and help your family and help everybody and do everything. But the personalizing of this from this tool helps me to remember, oh, there is a hero of the story, and it's not me. I can look to him, and I personally, I'm hidden in him. I'm protected. I can go under the comfort of his wing, Christ's wing, and not have to be the one to fix, to solve, to rescue, to make sense of this all. And so I can look to him and wait for, in Parakaleo, we use this metaphor of wearing yellow, looking to him in hope. And so the invitation to my heart, even on the airplane, was like, okay, Tammy, how will you look and wait for God to show up and rescue, remembering that he's with you and for you. And then one more thing about the end of the story, I don't know how personalizing it helps me so much to know, Revelation at the end of the scripture that talks about that one day there will be no more tears, there will be no more death and loss, and the things that we are either experiencing in life right now or fearful that we will soon experience. But when I think about the restoration, that it's not just that there'll be no more tears, but I will never cry again. Sherry and Deneen, you will never cry again. You'll never experience loss. And there's that when I put all that in a personal reality, that I'm in a story, yes, but it's God's story. he's the author. And as the story unfolds, he's with me and for me. And then it kind of moved from like, I got to fix this and figure it all out to, okay, I can take a breath. How, as this story unfolds, whatever you bring, how will you help me to move forward? With my eyes looking up, zooming out, remembering I'm not in this alone. And there's a very present help in times of trouble. And what will that look like? How will he care for me today? How will he care for my friends, my family? How will he call me to care for others? And so there's kind of, it's kind of been a weird, I don't know how to else describe it, but it's almost been a weird, like, I wonder what this is going to be like. I wonder what you're going to do. Like, Father, I wonder how you're going to, how you're going to rescue and redeem in all these thousands of little ways, and how you might use me or others. And I get excited because he's still, well, it's his story, and he's good and he's trustworthy. So I guess that's kind of where this tool has been really helpful for me. And the personalizing is probably what I would encourage you, if you've used the tool before, to do that and think about him not just overall, but with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
Right before you said it, I failed.
I failed, yes.
That's about a breath. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and Sherry, you're talking about music and stuff, or not just music, but that no word, that can't add a single hour. That's actually one of my arsenals. You said that sometimes we have different, what speaks to one person doesn't speak to another. And I was literally thinking when you said that, I was like, oh, a lot of times when I'm anxious or fearful, I feel it in my throat.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my husband one day and he looked at me, he said, oh, honey, he goes, tell me, just like, I'm present with you. He was that kind of gospel community. I'm present.
Yeah.
I don't need to fix you. He said, oh, I see you losing so many hours. You can't add an hour to your life by worrying, but you can lose so many. And I just want to be with you and help you so that you lose a few less hours in worry. And it was just a really sweet thing. And so, sure, that's been a part of mine. Now that I know that it's a part of yours, I will encourage you with that.
Man, that's so good. It's funny how you can be around these concepts for a while, and you just still need to be reminded. And I think that's what's so valuable about this gospel community, is that we remind each other of these truths that we know, but it's need kind of refreshers. Let's talk about, so like, as we look toward the next couple of months, like you said, Tammy, and Sherry, you referenced it as well, it's not always, I feel like this is probably the lightest of the season ahead. And we don't want to be fearful, but I think that with our gospel footing, we don't have to deny reality. We don't have to deny the truth of what we're facing. It actually gives us the courage to look at it squarely in the eye and say, I know whose I belong to. I know who I belong to. So as we think about women that are sure to come up, and ourselves that are going to come across loss or grief or trauma, whether it's the loss of our house, because, kids are home and husbands are home and all that, or a loss of life. What are some ways that you two are, or we, I'll share as well, how are we coming alongside other people in this time? And so I'll just go ahead and start. And then Tammy, I would love to hear from you. And then Sherry, maybe you can wrap up this section. And for those of you who are wondering, time-wise, we're going to go for 10, 15 more minutes. So if you're wondering, do I finish this or put the kids to bed? Wait for 15 more minutes and then put the kids to bed. So I've just been thinking about, like, how do, my situation is relatively easy in some ways. It's me and my husband and our little dog, and I was already working from home. And so it honestly, the work, like being inside, hasn't affected me a whole lot. I can still go to the park, we still have a grocery store around the street. But my heart really breaks when I think about all the people that are out there that are much more vulnerable, not only medically vulnerable because of, like you guys were saying, lung issues and with your spouses, but also financially vulnerable. People are losing their jobs. People were already in such a hard situation financially. And this, I can't even imagine how much this has compounded it. And so, so one thing that I just have to remind myself of is to intentionally extend my capacity to care. Because when, one of the things that the tools that God has been using for me is, it's called the omnis. So when we think about the fact that God is omnipotent, he's all powerful, he's ever present, he's omnipresent, and he's all knowing, he's omniscient. Well, when I go to stress and disorientation, I start taking on all those characteristics of God. And I start thinking that Deneen is all powerful, Deneen is all knowing. So that means, Deneen is going to look up all the CDC, the latest CDC website information, and I'm going to find out the best hand washing procedures and what I need to do to wipe my counters down. I'm going to be all knowing. And so when I think about people out there that are suffering, because I think that, it's up to me to be ever present, there's this tension inside of me because I can't get to my mom in New York. I can't, spend time with my elderly neighbor across the way because I don't want to infect her. I can't. And so that often can, instead of moving me forward, that causes me to just go into denial and not see what's too painful to see. And so when I remember my limitations, when I accept God's invitation that instead of being all powerful, the invitation to be dependent on him, instead of being all knowing, to be humble and realize I don't know all the things, my husband was going on a trip a couple of weeks ago, and part of me didn't, I didn't want him to go. And I was like, are you sure that's the best thing for you to do? And this says this, and I read this article. I don't know. Just being a release him and be humble. And then also, instead of feeling like I have to be everywhere for everybody, to be local. This is right now, this is my space, and so that means I can sit on my balcony and talk to my neighbor on her balcony. The limitation, but knowing that God is with her in her apartment. God is with my mother in New York. So that gives me the ability to extend compassion in the limited way that I can, rather than just cutting people off completely because it's too painful to engage. And I think a lot of times we're apathetic because it's too painful to even go there. But it also keeps me from being kind of falling into codependence and falling into a false sense of responsibility, or doing things out of obligation, or doing things because, I'm a good Christian, so I should be calling people and texting people, and maybe they don't want to hear from me, or maybe that's just really not even a gift. And so just being able to lean into how God has created me, and knowing that there are many different ways to serve, and trying to lean into that. So that's it for me. How about
I love that. I'm going to jump right in there because there really are 1,000 ways to love your neighbor in this time and space, and how he's gifted you, and then Sherry or myself and everyone here that might be listening, it's going to look different. And so having that curiosity and that openness and availability, God, how might you use me in this time? What's it going to look like? One of my personal arsenals I use for my heart all the time is, oh, Father, you can work above what I do, beyond what I do, despite what I do, through what I do, and even without. And the way you were talking about, Deneen, about, trusting that God can be with your mom and with others. It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful example of trust. And yet it doesn't in no way diminishes your love and your desire to care. So I love hearing that. And I hopefully we'll all have this kind of anticipation. I wonder how he's going to help us love one another, and to be loved by others as well, to be able to receive the kind of care that he and others will give to us in this time. So I think one of the ways that many of us will love will be maybe even just doing the work that we're already involved in. So right now, the part of the work that I'm doing with Parakaleo is, interestingly enough, creating online platforms. So yay, we were kind of already not necessarily ever imagining this reality in our world, but wanting to care for women around the world where it was difficult to gather together, or maybe too financially constricting to do that. So part of the work, I feel like I have an added energy right now to work hard to serve, to serve not just this ministry, but to serve women around the world. And I imagine there's lots of people in a variety of vocations that their actual work is I mean, not just a variety in all of our, and many or most of our vocations where we are serving people by doing the work that's already before us. And so to not diminish that and to, to not despise that and to say it is valuable to work and I can offer that to the glory of God and hopefully it'll serve my family, our community, and to kind of be excited about whatever that is before us.
Yeah.
That's
Thanks.
why.
Yeah.
Well, and Tammy, what you're saying brings me right into this whole thing of like when I said my first thought was, why did we move out of New York? It was too, instead of looking to where we are local. And one of the reasons why that came to my mind too is because we're in an area that's new to us. I don't know a lot of people. And so it's like, I've got to be doing something. I've got to be doing something to help. Mm-hmm. And I was realizing, productivity is one more thing that I add on to my righteousness. So I add that to the gospel instead of resting in the fact that it's complete. It's like, I just feel so much better about myself when I'm productive, like what's considered a good day while we're sitting here at home. Well, how many things did I get done? Mm-hmm. Really? Mm-hmm. And so, and so it's like if I went up, if I try to check, there's not a lot of elderly people around. I mean, they are, but I don't know them. This is not going to be the first time they're going to want to hear from me. So as I was thinking of that, John found this. He found this poem from John Milton, and it's Sonnet 19, and it's basically speaking to the fact that God doesn't need our work or our gifts. But then the last line really has stuck with me, and it says, "They also serve who only stand and wait." And repeat that. I'm going to say it again. They also serve who only stand and wait. And I was like, oh, could you be calling me to stand and wait? Oh, I don't like that. It was sort of like, oh yeah, I'm not happy with that because I want to be productive. So it was again that calling of going, can you accept where God has placed you right now? Can you be willing to go, yeah, I have open hands. Oh, to serve. What if those open hands to serve means to stand and wait?
That's beautiful.
Okay, I want to say, if you guys are listening to that beautiful bell, you keep hearing Tanny going,
yes. What is that?
Okay, we use a bell. Hold your bell up, Tammy. We use bells and we use them kind of to celebrate, to go like, wow, right on. And we, especially with our virtual communities, it's and when we see growth in each other, we really have that. Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that.
And it sounds like there's three of us that, and maybe many more who are listening too, who tend to. It's so easy to connect our worth and our value, our identity, our okayness to what we produce. That's not where we get the smile of the Father. And yet it's so good to remember that. So thank you, Sherry. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Oh man, this has been so good, y'all. This is, I hope it's helped somebody because it's helped me, for me, that was enough. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Just to wrap up, we just want to offer some next steps. One is follow us on social media. If you haven't already, go to our website, see what kind of offerings we have there. We're hoping to keep you on social media. We're going to be keeping you posted on stories from around the globe that are connected with Parakaleo. These are women in church planning that are doing the hard work of the ministry, and everyone's being impacted differently by the virus. And so this is our way of staying connected, to pray for one another, but also just to learn from the resilience and the gospel footing from others around the world. Second, if you are not on our mailing list, sign up to receive our newsletters. We're not trying to overwhelm your inboxes or anything like that, but we're hoping to be able to offer more virtual trainings like these. And if you were impacted by what you heard today, please sign up so that you can stay posted. And then, and you don't need to have gone through a Parakaleo training to do what we just did here today. Okay, you can sign up for a free virtual, I'm not trying to plug any one platform, but sign up for a free account through some virtual platform. Gather 2 or 3 women from your church or men from your church, and do this with them, do this on a regular basis. Use some of the practices that you heard here, listen without judgment, and, create a safe space for people to just share their feelings, to share what's really going on in their hearts. And we particularly encourage you to include somebody in your group that either maybe doesn't have a faith community or maybe goes to your church, but has been kind of on the margins. Like, bring them in. This is a great time to extend compassion and love to people that weren't experiencing it before. So thank you again, Sherry, Tammy. Yeah, y'all are rock stars. Thank you. I love you guys. I can't wait to have our staff meeting on Tuesday.
I know.
Everyone else, we love you. Stay connected. Bye-bye.